दर्शितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। अज्ञानतिमिरान्धस्य ज्ञानाञ्जनशलाकया चक्षुरुन्मीलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। I welcome all to this session. From a few sessions, we are discussing about the physics and Indian philosophy. Today, let us know some common principles that are some principles that are common to both Vedanta and physics. Let us take the concept of Maya first. It is the realm of relativity and the subject and object complex. So here Adi Shankara has proposed arguments conceived from two different points of view. One is relative and empirical, that is Sapeksha and Vyavaharika, and the other is Paramartha and Avyavaharya, the absolute and non-empirical. Keeping 2 points of view which are clearly distinct, he goes to explain in such a careful manner to apply them to the domain of both the domains, that is the domain of the subject and also the domain of the objects. And he leads us through a series of levels unfolding consciousness in the integration of the subject and object, or the observant and the observed in a higher unity of the absolute. Thus, we have in the domain the subject, the jiva, and avidya as the facts of experience, and in the domain of object, Ishvara and Maya as postulates corresponding to them. The jiva is considered in its 3 states of consciousness, that is Jagrat, Swapna and Sushupti, which are the expressions of the one absolute consciousness in relation to 3 frames of reference or 3 upadhis, corresponding to the 3 subjective states of the individual self, give as common experience to all human beings. There are 3 modes of cosmic consciousness seen as collective representations of all the individual selves. They are called as Vaishvanara or Virat, Hiranyagarbha and Ishvara. So in the waking state, that is in the Jagrat state, the subject is Vishwa. The universe is the world as observed with 5 senses, sense organs. Modes of consciousness corresponding to those of the individual are Vaishvanara or Virat. In Swapna state, the mode of consciousness is Taijasa, and universe is a dream of world, a replica of the waking state, and the object is Hiranyagarbha. In Sushupti, the subject Prajna, universe the causal state, and the object Ishvara. So this is how Adi Shankara has explained it. That experience is ultimate source of all knowledge is well accepted principle in Vedanta, and in accordance with this, a thorough analysis of experience is undertaken in the system. The 3 changing states of consciousness are the universal basis of human experience, but the fact that they are mutually exclusive is taken to imply the existence of the fourth state as basic form of consciousness, underlying them as their common ground, that is Turiya. Similarly, it is shown in their cosmic counterparts such as Virat, Hiranyagarbha, and Ishvara, which accept as necessary postulates in order to account for the fact of creation, for creation, uh, protection, and dissolution. Point to the existence of more basic reality underlying these relative manifestations. In the formulation, a solution to final problem of how to absolute reality lapses into a plurality of finite manifestations. Shankara takes the position consonant with the Upanishadic standpoint of holding the universe and the individual self as only apparently different, but essentially identical with Brahman, the absolute reality. The realm of appearance is then shown to originate from relativity of perception, avidya drishti, which is not so much as a contingent character of the jiva as its very definition. This frame dependent and observer specific cognition on the part of the individual soul is laid in contrast with the absolute view of reality, where the world and the individual self stand identified with Brahman. So, avidya and maya are taken as correlative terms by Adi Shankara. It is in the systematic formulation of the relativistic perspective of reality that Shankara works out the theory of adhyasa or avidya with reference to the subject or the observer, and introduces the principle of maya with reference to the objective universe of namarupas or names and forms. In other words, the theory of avidya, maya, is an attempt to explain how Brahman is manifested as the world or how absolute became the relative. Maya denotes indeterminacy in human knowledge. So, this ancient and somewhat obscure term acquired a new dimension in Adi Shankara's hands. Maya was indefinable or indeterminate. Reality is figured out of in the Upanishads is a matter of direct experience for seekers who have purified their hearts and not so much a thing of intellectual dogma. Enthusiasts for philosophy have often attempted to rationalize even truths which belong to the sphere of intuitive experience instead of confining their attempt to empirical perception. The term Maya, as used by Adi Shankara, denotes that transitional link in our understanding, which lies in the intermediate region between rationally conceivable categories and intuitively realizable truth. Whoever misses the subtle point about the concept of Maya comes to speak about it as though it were one of many things which come under the relation of cause and effect. Maya indeed means inexplicably, but because inexplicability. But because it was used as a concrete term and because of its association with Prakriti, which is the root of the world, some followers of Shankara felt that, along with Brahman, should somehow be explanatory principle of causation of the world. So, having stated the Brahma Sutras, the source from which they occur, the projection, continuance and dissolution of the universe, which is manifested through Namarupa, is Brahman. We are led on the question of the process of creation in the fifth sutra. Here, the concept of objectivity is first introduced in the absolute, which is otherwise a pure witness. Regarding the creation of the universe, it is said that, O amiable one, before its creation, the universe was but existence, Brahman, one without a second, says Chandogya Upanishad. That Brahman is visualized. I shall become many, I shall be born. It created fire. Again, in Aitareya Upanishad, it is stated, in the beginning, the universe was but one, but the one self alone. There was nothing else whatsoever was what winked. He visualized, let me create the worlds. Atmava idameka evagra asit nanyat kinchana mishat na sa ikshata lokannusruja iti sa iman lokan asrujata. The creative process started with the motion of energy, that is prana. Significant points made in the above statement is there was only one Atman in the beginning. This idea is emphasized by saying that there was nothing else that winked or moved. The creation of the universe began with the act of seeing by Brahman. Seeing may also mean mentally visualizing. The process of creation began with motion, may be the rising of thought. The next thing to emerge was prana, energy, that is fire. The universe originated from a cause which we should regard as conscious entity rather than as inert matter, the nature of that consciousness being fit to be epistemologically called subject rather than the object. Atma cha Brahma. What we call the material world, there is not any such material cause other than Brahman. He explains the inseparability of cause and effect, that is tadananyatvat. Avidya kalpita maya, or maya is imagined to be due to avidya, is not to say that avidya on the part of the individual is what created this great universe. We have to offer an acceptable explanation of creation from the side of absolute too. Hence, what are those objects which form the content of God's knowledge before creation? The answer is, we say that they are the unmanifested names and forms which cannot be referred to as either as different from or identical with Brahman, and which are about to become manifested. So Brahma Sutra 5 says that, 115 says that, Tattu ananyatva anirvachaniye namarupe avyakrite vyachikirshate iti Brahma. He says, here quantum field is near to avyakrita. The object of God's vision, that is tadikshita, it is pointed out by Adi Shankaracharya in very carefully chosen phrases. Unmanifested names and forms about to become manifested, which cannot be referred to either different or non-different from Brahman. Here, ananyatvat अनन्यत्वाभ्याम अनिर्वचनीये नामरूपे अव्याकृते व्याचिकीर्षिते यदा तु is the refinement of expression attained here by the philosopher is comparable only with the language of quantum physicists of our own time. The quantum field, for example, has certain common features to share with the unmanifested avyakrita or avyakta of the Vedantic theory. Avyakta, or the unmanifested state of the universe, or Namarupa, like quantum field, has potential of manifesting microparticles, and it may be spoken of as being in a state of readiness to do so. The quantum field is everywhere, even in a vacuum. The presence of the field is admitted in that state, and physicists speak of virtual photons, virtual electrons, etc. in this vacuum. Heinsberg says that uncertainty is an inherent property of the micro world. Shankara said the same regarding the causal state of the universe. The Namarupas and which constitute the phenomenal world are called Maya by Shankara, and is evident from the above context. Maya has two important features. Firstly, it is the object of Ishvara's act of seeing, and in this sense, it is the objectivity principle, that is, a pure subject called Brahman. The standing for the objectivity principle, Maya in Vedanta should mean what we call matter. Secondly, the names and forms are Maya has the property of indeterminacy attached to it regarding its status of reality. When we speak of pure subject pertaining to Brahman, we are doing so under compulsion of using dualistic language for sake of communication. But for this concession to ordinary language, we would not be in a position to discuss the concept of absolute. As far as the absolute point of view is concerned, we cannot speak Namarupas even in unmanifested state. We do see world outside us, and all our reasoning in order to reach the concept of absolute starts from the side of the object and proceeds towards the subject. In constructing the philosophy, we do so from our point of view and not from the standpoint of absolute. So, he leaves us in no doubt regarding this dual standpoint being always present with us. Avidya and Maya is Namarupadhi Drishti, that is frame dependent perception. Just as one finds that a mud pot is not really different from mud, as Chandogyopanishad says, uh, as a ball of mud is each and every particle in it is made up of mud. As in a gold bar, each and every particle has all the physical and chemical properties of gold. Nakha Nikrantana, in a nail cutter, each and every particle of nail cutter has the uh, proper physical and all the chemical and physical properties of iron. The foam and bubbles of water are not really different from water. So also one finds that even Namarupas, which account for the diversity in the world, are not really other than the absolute reality. Only on such an interpretation, the followers of Vedas come to the conclusion that the absolute point of view expressed in such pronouncements as there exists only one without a second. Ekam sat vipra bahudha vadanti. And there is no diversity whatsoever here occurs with these facts. The secret we ought to understand here is that we see names and forms through the instrumentation of names and forms themselves. The Namarupa functions as a reciprocal kind of relation between the subject and the object, just as in the context of the relativity theory, space-time measurements made by observers with the reference to space-time frames were reciprocal. Anyonyadhyasa. Shankara asserts the absolutists on undertaking in accordance with the directions given by the Vedas to examine whether the object really exists or not, realize that there is only one secondless reality with transcend where all kinds of empirical dealings. He says, Paramarthavadibistu Shrutyanusarana Nirupyamane Vastuni Kim Tatvatosti Vastu Kim Va Nasti iti Brahma Ekameva Dvitiyam Sarva Sankhya Vyavahara Shunyam iti Nirdharyate, says Brihadaranyaka Upanishad. Yes, here he talks about adhyasa. Let us see what adhyasa means and what different philosophers have said about it. What is meant by adhyasa or superimposition? Here it is beautifully explained by Swami Shivananda of Ramakrishna Math. Adhyasa literally means superimposition, we say. So, adhyasa, this is the illusory knowledge. Adhyasa literally means superimposition in the sense of mistaken ascription or imputation to something of an essential nature or attribute not belonging to it. It is an apparent presentation of the attribute. It is an apparent presentation of the attributes of one thing in another thing. It is the illusory attribution or superimposition of the universe in the Atman, which has no universe in it, like the misconception of silver in a conch shell, snake in the rope, man in the post, bluishness in the sky, water in the mirage, etc. This wrong notion is cast through avidya or ignorance. So, according to Shankara, adhyasa is the apparent presentation in the form of remembrance to consciousness something previously observed in some other thing. This is illusory knowledge. Adhyasa, Bhranti, Adhyaropa, Kalpana are some of the synonym terms of this. In Adhyasa Bhashya of Shankara, he writes, some indeed define the term superimposition as of the attribute of one thing on another thing. This so-called Anyatha Khyatiwadans maintain that in the act of adhyasa, the attributes of one thing, silver for instance, are superimposed in the shell on a different thing existing in a different place. So the Atma Khyatavadins maintain that in Adhyasa, the modification in the form of appears external. Both views fall under the above definition. The illusion and unspeakable silver is deluded and thus itself appears external. That is, both views fall under the above definition. In illusion, an unspeakable silver is produced, which is a reality for the time being. Silver is superimposed on the shell. The deluded soul actually bends down his body to the ground to possess the silver. The silver is not in the mind. It is not present somewhere else because it could not have experienced as here and now. You cannot say that it is mere non-entity. It is also not inherent in the shell because it could not have been removed later on. Therefore, we are compelled to admit that the silver has no real existence anywhere, but it has only a seeming reality for the time being, which is indeed indescribable. Others again define the superimposition as the error founded on the non-apprehension of the difference of that which is superimposed from that on which it is superimposed. This is the definition of Akhyatavadins. Others, some Anyatha Khyatavadin and Madhyamikas, according to Anandagiri, again define it as the fictitious assumption of attributes contrary to the nature of that thing of which something else is superimposed. The moon, although only appears as if she were double, but how is it possible in the interior self, which itself is not an object, there should be superimposed objects and their attributes? For everyone superimposes an object only on such other objects as are placed before him, that is, in contact with his sense organs. And you have said before that the interior self, which is entirely disconnected from the idea of thou, that is non-ego, is never an object. It is not, we reply, non-object in the absolute sense, for it is the object of notion of the ego. Pratyagatman is in reality non-object, for its Swayam Prakasha, self-luminous, that is the subjective factor in all cognition. But it becomes the object of the idea of the ego insofar as it is limited or conditioned by its adjuncts, which are the product of nescience, the internal organ, the sense, and the subtle and gross bodies, that is, insofar as it jiva, individual or personal soul. The interior self is well known to exist on account of immediate presentation, nor is it an exceptionless rule that objects can be superimposed only on such other subjects as are before, that is, in contact with our sense organs. For non-discerning men superimpose on the ether, which is not the object of sensuous perception, the dark blue color. Hence, it follows that assumption of the non-self being superimposed on the interior self is not unreasonable. The Atman or Brahman is really unconnected or unattached, asanga. And how can he be so related to the koshas or the sheets or the bodies as the ordinary regarded one with him? There are two kinds of relation in Indian logic. Samavaya Sambandha, inseparable relation as between an object and its parts, the quality and the thing that possesses the quality, the action and the actor, the type and the individual, etc. And the Samyoga Sambandha, the relation by contact between two things as between a drum and a stick. Atman's relation to the koshas can be of neither sort. It can be only adhyasa like that of a snake in the rope. This adhyasa is of two kinds, one-sided and mutual, anyonya adhyasa. That is, Atman and its attributes are superimposed on the koshas, and the koshas and their attributes are superimposed on the Atman. So, we say, my body exists, shines, is blissful, and I am a man, I am a doctor, I am a teacher, I am a householder, I am hungry, I am angry, etc. Attributes of the body are superimposed on the self. If a man thinks himself as stout, lean, fair, as standing, walking, or jumping, attributes of the sense organs, if he thinks of himself as mute, deaf, or one-eyed or blind, attributes of the internal organ, when he considers himself subject to desire, intention, doubt, determination, and so on. Thus, the producer of the notion of the ego, that is, the internal organ, is superimposed in the interior self, which in reality is witness of all the modifications of the internal organ and vice versa. The interior self, which is witness of everything, is superimposed on the internal organ, the senses, and so on. In this way, there goes on this natural, beginningless and endless superimposition, which appears in the form of wrong conception in the cause of individual souls, appearing as agents and enjoyers of the results of their actions, and is observed by everyone. So, this adhyasa or superimposition is understood by us like this, and it is anadi and ananta, and it is the wrong conception is the cause of individual souls appearing as agents and enjoyers of the results of their actions, and this is observed by everyone. If nothing exists but one absolute simple being, if the truth is one, when arises there this many which we experience through the indriyas or organs. When this appearance of this world by which we see ourselves surrounded and in which we exist as individual being, truth cannot certainly contradict experience. Brahman or truth is associated with certain illusory power called Maya or Avidya, to which this appearance of the phenomenal universe is due. This is the statement of Shankaracharya. This world is not real. This plurality is an illusion. It is mere appearance like snake in the rope. It vanishes when one gets the knowledge of the self. So avidya is beginningless, but it terminates in the aspirant when Brahma Jnana dawns. That is, when we have the knowledge of the Supreme, this illusion disappears and we will, one we will become one with that being is only Brahman, nor can it be called non-being or asat in the strict sense. That is, so when we uh, get the knowledge, when the when the curtain of ignorance or avidya is unveiled, so we can have the knowledge of Brahman, then all these dualities will disappear and only one truth shines. That is the Brahman. That is why he said, Adi Shankara says, Brahma Satya and Jagat Mithya. Mithya means it is illusory. And what we see is not real. The reality is the only Brahmajnana, he says. And by saying that, Adi Shankaracharya does not mean that the world is absolutely nothing, like a horn or a hair or a bar or a lotus in the sky. He means that the world has a relative existence. That is, it is not so real as Brahman, who exists in the past, present, and future. That is not real at all times. When compared with Brahman, world is unreal. That is what he exactly means. Maya cannot be adequately described. It is a mystery beyond our understanding. So it is uh, anirvachaniya, he says. Brahman is not affected a bit by the illusion. Just as a writer of a drama projects his own thoughts when he writes down the scenes in various acts, so also Brahman has projected this universe by mere willing. This theory, they are doctrine of Shankara, is known as Vivartavada or Mayavada or Anirvachaniya Khyātivāda. A tree or a dog or a rose is a vivarta of Brahman, just as earring on a bracelet is vivarta or apparent modification of gold. So the aim of Vedantic sadhana is to destroy entirely the erroneous idea, I am the body, and to substitute the idea, I am Brahman. When we get the knowledge of the self, the erroneous idea, I am the body, is annihilated and we get liberation or mukti. This mistaken idea is removed automatically, just as the illusory snake, which is superimposed on the roof, is destroyed by bringing a light. So, also, the idea of reality of this world is removed when we get the knowledge of Brahman. The Shrutis emphatically declare. So the mukti is the correct uh, jnana. So there is no liberation without knowledge of the self. He says that is the self-realization. By knowing the self, one passes beyond the death. There is no other way, he says. So empirical knowledge is no knowledge at all from all standpoint of knowledge of Brahman. So we have to have the knowledge of Brahman. So this adhyasa, that is superimposition of the Jivatma and Paramatma, is relative. and this empirical knowledge is not the real knowledge. So a cow runs away when he sees a man coming near her with rice stick in his hand. She thinks that he wants to beat her and therefore she runs away. While she approaches a man who advances towards her with some fresh green grass in his hand in a similar manner, persons who are endowed with higher intelligence run away when they behold fierce looking men drawing near them with shouts and drawn swords, while they approach with confidence and joy men opposite nature. With regard to perception, man also behaves in the same manner as animals, though he possesses superior intelligence. So the superimposition is destroyed by the knowledge of self. This knowledge of self is not mere uh, theoretical or intellectual knowledge, it is the actual realization through contact of constant meditation. It is direct intuitional knowledge gained by coming in direct contact with Brahman. So, avidya is ignorance. So there is superimposition is avidya. Avidya or false knowledge is destroyed when truth knowledge of the self, uh, when we have the true knowledge of the self. Knowledge of the self is the only way to liberation. So the study of Brahma Sutras are absolutely necessary. So in Brahma Sutra of Adhyasa Bhashya of Shankara to Brahma Sutras beautifully explains these principles, and these principles are the embedded principles of physics, says the physicists. Let us know more things in the sessions to come. Thank you all for thank you all. Om Tat Sat.